Welcome to Snoozy Tour, the place where history drifts into dreams. Here we bring you the forgotten stories, the mysteries of the past, told slowly, softly, so you can close your eyes and let time carry you away. Tonight, we journey back to the year 536 AD, remembered as one of the darkest years in human history. The sun itself seemed to vanish, cloaking the world in a strange blue haze. Crops failed, empires trembled, and famine spread across continents. But within this shadow, there were also stories of resilience, of families fighting to stay together, of hope that refused to die. Settle in, find a comfortable place to rest, and let us begin the tale of a child torn from Constantinople, a family separated by fire, and a world learning to survive when the light itself disappeared. This is the story of the darkness of 536. The rooster crowed long before dawn, as it always did, though you were already awake, listening to the faint rustle of your mother moving about the hearth. A fire crackled in the dim light, sending curls of smoke up toward the hole in the roof. The air still carried a winter's chill, but there was a promise of spring in it too, a softer breath that made the bare trees outside whisper of new leaves to come. Your father stirred beside you on the straw pallet, muttering something half asleep, then sat up with a groan. He rubbed the stiffness from his shoulders, weathered by years of bending over the fields. His hands, cracked and calloused, looked more like the bark of old olive trees than flesh. Yet when he placed one of those rough palms gently on your head, ruffling your hair, there was tenderness. "Up, little one," he said. "The sun will rise soon, and the soil waits for no dreamers." You scrambled up, pulling your wool tunic over your thin frame. The cold floor bit at your bare feet until you slipped on your sandals. Outside, the world was still gray, that moment between night and dawn where shadows stretched long and the horizon held its breath. Chickens clucked restlessly in their coop. A dog barked once in the distance. Beyond that, the silence of the countryside lay unbroken. Life in the village followed rhythms older than memory. The seasons dictated everything: when to plant, when to reap, when to celebrate, when to mourn. Today, like countless mornings before it, meant preparing the fields. Your father had been saving seed barley through the long winter, counting each measure carefully. If spring came on time, the crop would see you through another year. If it failed, well, no one in the village liked to dwell on that possibility. Your mother handed you a small round of bread, still warm from the coals, its crust crackling as you bit into it. She pressed another piece into your hand for later. Her face was lined from years of work, but her eyes were gentle, always searching your own as if to make sure you were truly there, truly safe. She kissed your forehead quickly. She was not a woman of many outward displays, but the gesture carried the weight of love and worry. Outside, villagers were beginning to stir. Smoke rose from other hearts, mingling with the morning mist. You passed your neighbor Agatha, the old widow with her bent back and sharp tongue. She nodded curtly as she drove her goats out to graze, muttering complaints about their stubbornness. Everyone knew Agatha's temper, but just as well everyone knew her kindness, though she buried it deep. She had brought you honey cakes once when you were sick, grumbling the whole way that children never appreciated the value of medicine. In the village square, men and boys gathered with tools slung over their shoulders, hoes, spades, and wooden plows ready to be pulled by oxen. The women trailed behind, carrying baskets of seed or younger children clinging to their skirts. There was comfort in the routine, a sense that no matter how many wars emperors fought far away, or how many bishops argued in distant cathedrals, life here went on much the same. The sun's edge appeared on the horizon, pale gold spilling across the fields. Everyone paused for a moment, almost instinctively, to look. It was a small ritual, unspoken but shared. The sunrise meant the world was still turning, that day had come again, that the fragile thread of life continued unbroken. You followed your father to your family's plot of land. The soil was dark and damp from recent rains. He knelt, scooping a handful in his palm, letting it fall through his fingers thoughtfully. "Good earth," he murmured, more to himself than to you. "May it stay so." Then he began marking furrows with the plow, grunting with effort as the oxen strained forward. You trotted behind with the basket, careful not to spill, waiting for his signal to scatter the seed. Each motion felt ordinary yet important. There was a rhythm to it, a harmony between your father's steady labor, your mother's quiet strength, and your own small but eager hands. You were part of something larger, part of the cycle that had sustained your people for generations. You could almost believe it would continue forever, unchanging. But as the sun rose higher, you noticed something odd. The light felt dimmer than it should, weaker somehow, as if a thin veil lay across the sky. The air seemed cooler too, despite the season. A shiver ran through you, though the morning was not especially cold. You glanced at your father, wondering if he noticed. He squinted at the horizon, then shook his head as if dismissing a stray thought. "Strange mist," he muttered. "Perhaps the sea winds carry it inland." By midday, the sky had taken on a peculiar hue, a faint bluish tint that made shadows blur and fade. The villagers whispered uneasily, but no one wanted to speak of omens on a day meant for planting. Children still played in the square, their laughter thin in the muted light. Old men sat beneath the fig tree, smoking their pipes, pretending not to notice the unsettled sky. That night, after a simple supper of barley stew, you lay awake on the straw pallet, listening to the wind outside. It carried a different note, a hollow sound that made you think of empty spaces. You clutched the small wooden bird your father had carved for you, a toy but also a talisman. In the flickering firelight, its shadow wavered on the wall, small and fragile, like your own place in this vast and mysterious world. Sleep came slowly with a weight in your chest you couldn't name. Tomorrow would bring another dawn. You prayed it would be bright, golden, ordinary. The morning air outside Syracuse carried a crisp chill, though it was softened by a sky no longer locked entirely in haze. You stood at the city gate with your parents and Thomas, ready to set out on the road. The stones beneath your feet had been worn smooth by centuries of travelers, traders, soldiers, refugees. Today you joined their number again, not fleeing but returning. And yet, return carried its own uncertainties. Demetrios clasped your shoulder, his hand rough from years of work. His dark eyes lingered on yours with the unspoken weight of shared survival. "Will you come visit us at the farm?" you asked, not wanting to lose this anchor to the world outside. "When I can," he promised. "And if you ever need anything." "I know," you finished, smiling faintly. "We'll find each other." With that farewell, you turned away from the walls of Syracuse, the sound of the city fading behind you. Ahead stretched the road to Helena's farm, winding across the Sicilian countryside. You carried not just your belongings, but the fragile hope of rebuilding a life together after so much loss. Traveling was slower this time. Your mother, still weakened from her ordeals, needed frequent rests. No one minded. After years apart, each pause became a chance to share stories and rebuild the closeness you thought had been lost forever. As she leaned on your father's arm, you noticed how carefully he matched his pace to hers, every step a quiet declaration that he would not lose her again. You spoke of the farm as you walked, its fields, the routines, the animals. You told them of Helena's practical kindness, of Thomas's wisdom, of the sense of stability you'd found there. They listened intently, asking questions, eager to fill in the years they had missed. "It sounds like you found a place for yourself," your mother said. "I have," you admitted. "It's not like our old village, but it became home." "And this Marcus," your father added, "tell us about him." So you did. You spoke of his gentleness with animals, his quiet resilience, his loneliness, and the bond that had grown between you. You told them of the promise you had made to him, that you would return. "He has no one else," you explained. "His father got him onto the ship during the fire, but never made it out himself." Your mother's voice softened with sorrow. "Poor child. I promised I'd come back for him." Your father looked thoughtful. "A promise like that must be kept." When the farm finally came into view, the familiar sight made your chest tighten with something close to relief. Helena greeted your parents warmly, her presence as steady and commanding as ever. She insisted they stay as guests while they regained their strength, waving off their protests with a brisk shake of her head. Marcus found you almost at once. His eyes lit up when he saw you, but when he noticed your parents, he hesitated, hanging back like a startled animal. Later, when you were alone, he whispered the question that had been burning inside him. "Are you leaving with them?" His voice trembled with fear. "Not without you," you told him firmly. "I promised. Remember?" Relief flickered in his face, but doubt lingered. Promises, after all, had been broken many times in his short life. Over the next days, your parents adjusted to farm life. Though Helena insisted they were guests, they soon found themselves drawn into the rhythms of work. Your father helped with small tasks in the fields. Your mother, though frail, lent her hands to food preparation and mending. They began to know Marcus, first with gentle words, then with stories and small kindnesses that slowly drew him from his shell. One evening, the four of you sat in the common room by the fire. The smell of wood smoke and stew mingled in the air. Your father cleared his throat, a sign you recognized as the beginning of something important. "Helena," he began, "your farm is well run." Remarkably so, considering these times. She raised an eyebrow, curious where this was leading. "My wife and I had thought to return east to try rebuilding our lives there. But seeing this place, seeing how our child has thrived here," he glanced at your mother, who nodded encouragement. "We wonder if there might be room for 2 more permanent workers." Helena considered him with the sharp look of someone used to judging character. Then she nodded. "I could use experienced hands, especially with spring planting coming, darkness or no. And Marcus," your mother added softly, "he would stay with us, of course, as family." Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open as if he could hardly breathe. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" your father confirmed. "If that's what you want." Marcus looked at you, silently asking if this was truly happening. You nodded, heart swelling with relief and joy. Helena gave a practical smile. Then it settled. "There's an empty worker's house at the south end of the property. It'll need repair, but it would suit a family of 4 well enough." So began another chapter. The empty house became your home. Your father worked the fields, your mother with food and textiles. Marcus was hesitant at first, afraid your parents might change their minds, but their consistent kindness won him over. One night he asked you, "Do you think they really want me?" You smiled, though the ache in his voice cut deep. "I know they do. They wouldn't have said it otherwise. But I'm not their real child." "Neither am I anymore," you answered, surprising yourself. "Not the same one they lost in Constantinople. We've all changed. We're building something new now." Marcus grew quiet, then nodded as if this truth comforted him. And so, with each passing day, the pieces of a shattered life began to knit into something whole again. The days that followed settled into a rhythm your heart had long craved. At last, your family lived together under the same roof. Your parents in one bed, you and Marcus in your small cots. The warmth of bodies and fire warding off the chill that still clung to Sicily's evenings. The worker's house wasn't much. Cracked plaster, a roof in need of patching, doors that squeaked and rattled in the wind. But to you it was a palace. Not because of the walls or roof, but because of the voices inside it, the voices of a family whole again. Your father rose before dawn, just as he used to in your village, stretching his arms and muttering the old prayer to the morning. "If the sun rises, so must I." You watched him with quiet admiration. He had nearly been broken by loss, yet here he was, hoe in hand, walking out into Helena's fields with purpose. Your mother regained her strength slowly. At first she tired easily, pausing often when carrying baskets of vegetables or kneeling to mend cloth. But her eyes shone with determination. She told Marcus stories as she worked, tales of her own mother teaching her to weave, of festivals in the village, of the stubborn goat that once chased your father up a tree. Marcus laughed, and in that laughter something healed. The farm itself seemed to sense the shift. Winter began to loosen its grip. Buds swelled on branches. A few stubborn flowers pushed through the cold earth. Even the birds seemed more eager in their songs. One morning, Thomas stood beside you beneath a gnarled fruit tree, his hands clasped behind his back. "The darkness is lifting," he said, almost in wonder. "How can you tell?" you asked. He pointed to the tips of the branches. "See those buds? Earlier than last year. And listen, more birds." You listened. He was right. A chorus of chirps and trills filled the air, richer than it had been since the sky first dimmed. For months you had survived day by day, not daring to think ahead. But now, a cautious hope unfurled in you, fragile as the buds on the trees. Word traveled slowly in those days, carried by merchants, wanderers, and the occasional official courier. But even the smallest scraps of news held power. One traveler passing through told of skies brightening in other regions too, of farmers planting once more, of markets opening again. For the first time in nearly 2 years, hope was no longer just a whisper. It was a rumor spreading across the empire. Yet hope always walked hand in hand with fear. Another traveler spoke of plagues spreading from Egypt. Whole districts of Alexandria, he said, had been struck down, and ships carried the sickness northward. Syracuse, he warned, had begun enforcing quarantines. Helena reacted swiftly. She gathered the workers in the courtyard, her face stern, her voice steady. "No one goes to the city unless it cannot be avoided," she said. "Any supplies must come from smaller markets. Anyone who feels ill will report it immediately. The darkness has left us weak. We cannot afford carelessness now." Her words carried weight. Everyone on the farm knew how much they owed her leadership. You saw your parents exchange a look of approval. They respected her as much as you did. Life on the farm continued, but with a new layer of vigilance. Vinegar water was set outside each house for washing. Travelers were kept at a cautious distance. Work was divided with care, so no one was overburdened. In the midst of these precautions, though, life grew fuller. Marcus thrived under your father's guidance. He learned to tend the animals, his gentleness turning into real skill. You watched him cradle a lamb born weak, coaxing it to feed, his small hands steady with a calm far beyond his years. "Your brother has a gift," your father remarked one evening, watching Marcus in the pen. "Brother?" Marcus repeated later, tasting the word like honey. "Do you think it's true?" "It is true," you said without hesitation. "Blood doesn't matter. What we choose matters." The greatest change of all came one clear morning in early April. You stepped outside, bucket in hand, expecting the same dim glow you'd grown used to. But the eastern horizon was ablaze with color, gold, not blue. The sun's edge broke free of the haze, climbing into the sky with a brilliance you hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. For a moment you couldn't move. Your breath caught and tears pricked your eyes. The others emerged one by one: Helena, Thomas, your parents, Marcus, each transfixed by the ordinary miracle of sunrise. No one spoke at first. The only sound was the wind in the fields and the faint rustle of leaves. "It's coming back," Marcus whispered, slipping his small hand into yours. "Yes," you said, your voice thick. "It's coming back." That sunrise did not banish the fears of plague, nor did it erase the scars of hunger and loss. But it marked a turning. The world itself was stirring from its long sleep. And with it, you felt your family stirring too, not just surviving but beginning to live again. The return of sunlight gave everything a sheen of miracle. Wheat shoots greened the fields, fruit trees blossomed, and lambs bounded through the pastures. But the miracle came with shadows, for hope is always followed by fear. The fear had a name now: the plague. Travelers brought whispers of it like wind-borne seeds. A merchant from Catania told of bodies burning in pits, smoke rising thicker than incense. Another swore he saw ships anchored outside Syracuse, their crews sick, barred from the harbor. The word spread across the farm like sparks. Each story was told and retold, reshaped by dread until even the healthy eyed their neighbors with suspicion. Helena wasted no time. She gathered the community again in the courtyard, her arms folded, her tone sharp as iron. "We lived through darkness because we acted together. Now we face disease, and again we will act together." She laid down rules with the precision of a general. No travel to Syracuse. All supplies from the crossroads market only. Visitors housed outside the main buildings, observed for sickness. Daily washing stations with vinegar water. Thomas, gray and stooped but still sharp-eyed, spoke of what he had seen in earlier outbreaks. "Fever comes first," he explained to the silent crowd. "Then swellings in the armpits and groin. Black marks on the skin. Once those appear..." He stopped. He didn't need to finish. The farm workers looked grim, but no one argued. Everyone remembered what Helena's discipline had achieved in the darkness. Her commands were law because they had saved lives before. Despite the tension, life carried on. Work still needed doing. Fences mended. Wheat weeded. Goats milked. You threw yourself into chores not because they distracted you, though they did, but because they were life itself. Every row of beans hoed, every bucket of water carried, was another step against despair. Marcus followed your father from pen to pasture, his small feet quick, his eyes shining. He asked endless questions. Why do chickens dust themselves? Why do sheep chew twice? Why do goats never listen? Your father answered with patience, sometimes even with a chuckle. Slowly, Marcus shed the fear that had clung to him since Constantinople. But at night, when the lamps burned low, the fear returned. "Will the sickness come here?" he asked you, voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," you admitted, "but we'll be ready." "And together," he added, gripping your sleeve. "Together," you promised. The weeks passed. The sunlight grew stronger. The world began to look normal again, almost too normal, as if mocking your vigilance. Then one evening, new travelers appeared on the road. Gaunt, weary, their clothes dusty, their eyes haunted. Their accents revealed them as Byzantine from Thrace. Your father hailed them in your shared tongue, and soon you were all listening in rapt silence. "It's worse in the east," said the eldest, a man with deep lines carved into his face. The darkness lingered longer. Crops failed. Many starved. And now the plague. Constantinople itself is drowning in it. They say a third of the city has died already. Your father's face paled. "The whole city?" The man nodded. "The whole empire. Egypt, Syria, now Greece. It follows the trade routes west." The words fell like stones in a pond, rippling through every heart. Constantinople, the mighty eternal city, laid low by an invisible enemy. Helena allowed the travelers to stay in the outer barn after careful inspection, but the farm buzzed with unease. At supper that night, the news hung heavy. No one wanted to eat. Even Thomas sat staring into the fire, silent. Later, when you and Marcus lay in your shared room, he whispered again, "If it comes, if we get sick." You turned toward him, forcing steadiness into your voice. "Then we fight it together like we fought the dark. And if we can't," you stopped, not wanting to finish. "Marcus did it for you. Then we still stay together." You pulled him close, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Fear was everywhere, but so was love. That too was contagious. The next morning dawned bright and golden. Fields sparkled with dew, a sight you had almost forgotten was possible. Your father stood beside you, shading his eyes to watch the rising sun. "After darkness, after famine, after plague," he murmured. "Still the sun comes back." You wanted to believe him. And maybe, just maybe, you did. The farm had become more than a refuge. It was now a small world of its own, with rules, rhythms, and rituals. Yet even in that fragile peace, your mother's mind turned toward something beyond food and shelter. One evening, as she mended a torn tunic by lamplight, she spoke with quiet determination. "The children should learn to read," she said, her needle flashing in the firelight. Your father looked up from the small wooden sheep he was carving for Marcus. "Read? Is that necessary for farm life?" "It's necessary for life," she countered. "My mother taught me. I want to pass it on. Especially now, after everything." Her words carried the weight of the unspoken. After the darkness, after nearly losing everything. Books were rare, parchment costly. But your mother had already asked Helena, who agreed to lend her copy of the Gospels. Thomas promised to make wax tablets for practice. So when the day's chores ended, a new rhythm began. By lamplight, your mother traced letters into dirt or wax. Alpha, beta, gamma. Slowly, patiently, she guided your hand, then Marcus's smaller, clumsier one. Marcus struggled at first, his lines crooked, his letters backwards. He scowled, muttered, wanted to give up. But your mother had patience like stone, and your encouragement kept him trying. "Will I read about heroes?" he asked one night, tongue poking out as he traced a shaky alpha. "If you want to," she said. "Or animals, or distant lands. Reading opens doors to places you've never been." Your father, though he couldn't read, sometimes sat nearby, telling stories while you practiced. Tales of your Byzantine village, of Roman emperors, of the stubborn goat that once ruled his garden. He became the family's voice of memory while your mother became the keeper of letters. The farm community noticed. Helena herself passed by one evening, pausing in the doorway to watch you scratch symbols into wax. "Knowledge is as valuable as wheat," she said simply. "More so. Wheat feeds a season. Knowledge feeds a life." Thomas too showed interest. "Don't let the boy quit," he whispered to you one evening when Marcus slumped in frustration. "That stubbornness will turn into strength one day." Marcus did not hear him, but you did, and it strengthened your resolve to help your younger brother succeed. Spring turned into early summer. The sun's return was now undeniable. The haze still lingered some days, but the light grew stronger longer. Wheat pushed high, fruit trees bore heavy. The farm buzzed with energy. But beyond the farm walls, whispers grew darker. The plague was said to be spreading inland from the ports. Villages were abandoning their markets. Syracuse itself was said to smell of smoke and sickness. Helena doubled precautions. Vinegar at every doorway. Strict rules on visitors. Yet even she knew rules were no cure. The community lived with the constant knowledge that unseen death could creep closer at any moment. One warm June morning, you helped your father in the wheat field. On the nearby road, a group of riders appeared, 5 of them dusty, determined. Their clothes marked them as officials. One dismounted, a sealed scroll in hand. By order of the Exarch of Sicily, the messenger announced, representing Emperor Justinian. Helena received the scroll, her face unreadable. When she returned, she explained, the emperor had imposed a new tax, 1/5 of every harvest, to rebuild the empire after darkness and plague. A murmur ran through the farm. 1/5 was no small portion. After hunger, after loss, this felt cruel. The empire demands, Helena said simply, and we endure. We have survived worse. Her words steadied the farm. But later that night, in the quiet of your small house, your parents whispered about fairness and burden. The rich in Constantinople will hardly notice, your father said bitterly. Still, your mother replied, we must find strength in what cannot be taken, knowledge, family, faith. And so, by lamplight, the lessons continued. The Greek letters grew easier. Marcus stopped grumbling so much. Slowly, the shapes became sounds and sounds became words. You traced them carefully, savoring the magic of it. After everything, darkness, fire, famine, plague, letters felt like small lanterns. Fragile, yes, but enough to push back the night. By midsummer, the farm thrummed with life. Wheat ripened in the fields, vines grew heavy with grapes, and chickens scratched busily in the dust. For the first time in years, abundance felt possible. Yet with every golden stalk, every bursting cluster, came a shadow, the emperor's new tax. 1/5 of the harvest was already promised to Constantinople, claimed before it even touched your family's hands. Still, Helena kept the community focused. We endure what we must, she said firmly, and we protect our own. No one argued, because she had been right before and because there was simply no other choice. It was during this tense summer that travelers once again appeared on the road. Not merchants this time, but refugees, gaunt, hollow-eyed, their clothes ragged from weeks of journeying. They looked Eastbourne, their speech thick with accents from Thrace. Your father hailed them in your shared tongue. Soon, around a small fire outside the barns, they told their story. The East is broken, said the oldest man, his voice hoarse. The darkness lingered longer there. Crops failed, villages starved. Then the plague came. Constantinople, 1/3 gone within months. Entire streets burned to stop the spread. Your father's face turned gray. The city itself? Yes, the man said grimly. The great city groans like a dying ox. Some say the end times have come. Darkness, famine, pestilence, just as the scriptures foretold. A silence followed, heavy as stone. You could hear only the crackle of the fire and the soft shuffle of Marcus shifting closer to your side. Helena offered the refugees temporary shelter in an outbuilding, after strict examination to ensure no illness. They accepted gratefully, but the news they carried weighed on everyone. That night, your parents sat together in the dim light of your small house, their voices hushed. Should we move farther west? Your mother asked. Away from the plague's path? Where would we go? Your father answered. The traveler said it spreads everywhere along the roads. Here we have food, shelter, work. If it comes, it comes. Better here than on the road again. Their quiet words felt heavier than the emperor's tax. You lay still, pretending sleep, but every syllable carved into your mind. Marcus stirred beside you, whispering once he knew your parents had fallen silent. You're worried, he said. Yes. Will it find us? I don't know. Then we face it together, he murmured, clutching your sleeve. And in his simple certainty you found strength. Life carried on with deliberate rhythm. Wheat harvested early, grapes ripened under hot skies, goats bleated in the pastures. Labor kept fear at bay. One evening, while binding sheaves in the field, your father told you quietly, "Do you remember our first harvest here? After the darkness?" The wheat barely reached your knees. He looked around at the waist-high stalks, nodding. Nature recovers, if given the chance. You thought of Constantinople, of the empty villages you had seen, of streets burned to ashes. Did people recover as easily as fields? Or did scars last longer than soil remembered? The harvest festival came despite the fears. Honey bread, pressed wine, flowers tied to doorways. Helena approved, insisting that joy itself was a kind of strength. The workers gathered under lanterns, Thomas played a reed flute, and children chased each other across the yard. You sat watching the glow, Marcus beside you, cheeks flushed from laughter. For a moment, the weight of plague and tax, famine and fear lifted. Marcus leaned into you, whispering, "It's good, isn't it? Even after everything." "Yes," you said softly. "It is good." The plague might be moving closer. The empire might be groaning under its burdens. But here, in this circle of firelight and song, life insisted on continuing. And that insistence felt like defiance, like courage, like hope itself. By late summer, the farm had become an island in a sea of fear. Beyond its boundaries, the plague crept closer, whispered in every piece of news from the road. A village to the east abandoned. A market closed. A caravan refusing to stop anywhere for fear of strangers. Then came the report that chilled every heart. The sickness had reached a coastal town less than a day's journey away. Helena wasted no time. She called the entire community to the central yard. Lanterns flickered against her stern face, shadows deepening the lines of care etched by the past years. "From this day forward," she declared, "no one leaves the farm unless it cannot be avoided. No visits to market, no unnecessary journeys. If supplies are needed, Thomas alone will fetch them, and even he will wash and sleep apart for 3 days after returning." She looked each of you in the eye, her gaze as sharp as any blade. "If anyone feels fever or swelling, you speak at once. No secrets, no shame. Silence will kill us faster than sickness." The words landed heavy. No one argued. You all remembered the darkness, how Helena's rules had saved you then. Her voice carried the same weight now. Precautions multiplied. Vinegar stations appeared outside every doorway. Clothes hung in the sun before being brought inside. Hands were scrubbed raw. Every cough, every fevered flush of cheek sent ripples of dread through the community. Yet fear could not stop the seasons. Work still filled each day, goats to milk, wheat to thresh, grapes to press. The steady rhythm of chores kept panic from consuming you. There was comfort in labor, in the simple act of carrying water, binding sheaves, stacking wood. At night, though, the fear returned. Marcus often crept to your cot, whispering in the dark. "If it comes here, what do we do? We follow Helena's rules. And if that doesn't work, then we face it together." The answer was always the same, and each time you said it, you felt the truth in it deepen. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, you and your father stood in the vineyard. He carefully cut a cluster of grapes, purple and heavy, placing them into a basket. "In our village," he said quietly, "we had a harvest festival. Music, dancing, honey bread." His voice grew wistful. "I wonder if anyone there still does it. If there's anyone left to remember." You swallowed hard, staring at the vines. "Maybe we can remember for them," you suggested. He looked at you, pride softening the grief in his eyes. "Maybe we can." So a decision was made. There would be a festival on the farm. Not grand, not careless, but a small defiance against despair. Preparations began. Flowers gathered, tables scrubbed, bread baked with precious honey. On the night of the full moon, lanterns glowed, music rose from Thomas's reed flute, and laughter, rare and precious, filled the air. Even Helena allowed herself a smile as she watched her workers eat, dance, and sing. For a few hours, the plague seemed far away. Marcus tugged you into the circle of dancers, his eyes bright, his steps clumsy but joyful. "Come on," he urged. You laughed, truly laughed, and joined him. Around you, the farm glowed with life. Fear was still there, waiting at the edges, but for this one night, joy claimed the center. As the festival ended, you sat with Marcus under the lanterns, his face flushed from running games. "My father used to say we should celebrate when we can," he told you softly, "because tomorrow might change everything." You looked at him, this boy who had lost so much and yet could still hold hope. "Your father was wise," you said, "and tonight he would have been proud." The moon shone down, bright and steady, as if to bless the fragile joy of a farm that dared to sing in the shadow of death. The grape harvest ended under skies brighter than you remembered since before the darkness. Pressed juice filled barrels, the smell of fermenting wine drifting across the farm. For a moment, it almost felt like life before, the steady cycle of work, feast, and rest. But then October came, and with it, the frost. The first chill morning glittered silver across the fields. You and Marcus raced outside to see your breath clouding in the air, to touch the sparkling grass that crunched underfoot. It felt strange, almost magical. To you, frost was a return to the natural order, proof that the world had not ended. Yet frost also meant winter preparations. The farm bustled with urgency, repairing roofs, stacking firewood, preserving fruit, salting meat. Helena oversaw every task with her unshakable calm, while Thomas moved slower than before, his age beginning to weigh on him. Amid this busyness came news, whispers that the plague had spread inland, striking villages not far from the crossroads market. A merchant passing by told of whole families gone, of bells tolling endlessly in Syracuse. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Fear thickened like the cold. Helena tightened rules further. No markets, no outsiders, no exceptions. Supplies were to be stretched. Barrels inventoried, jars sealed tight. Better to go hungry, she said, than to open the door to death. No one argued. Your family's evenings grew quieter. After supper, you sat by the fire in your small house. Your mother continued reading lessons, tracing letters on wax tablets, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. Marcus improved slowly. He could now puzzle out short words, his face glowing with triumph when he managed. "Look," he'd whisper, pointing proudly at crooked letters. "I read it." And you would grin and praise him because small victories mattered more than ever. Sometimes your father carved wooden animals while telling stories of your old village. Goats in the square, bread baked for festivals, the songs people sang at weddings. The stories warmed you though they carried an ache. Would those festivals ever happen again? Would those songs ever be sung in the streets of your village? Then one evening, Thomas made an announcement in the common room. His voice was rough, but his eyes still sharp. "The plague has slowed," he said. "Merchants from Syracuse say new cases are fewer. It burns hot, then dies down, for a time." The words sent ripples through the farm. Relief, disbelief, cautious hope. Could it be true? Was this shadow, like the darkness before it, fading at last? Helena raised her hand for silence. Even if it slows, we do not relax. Precautions remain. Discipline is survival. Still, the air that night felt lighter. Even Marcus, usually cautious, whispered to you as you lay down, "Maybe it's ending. Maybe we'll be safe." You didn't correct him. For once, you let yourself believe it too. The first snow came early, dusting the Sicilian hills in a white veil. You and Marcus ran outside, laughing, scooping handfuls of snow until your fingers burned. For a brief moment, the plague, the darkness, the fear, all of it, fell away beneath the pure joy of snowflakes on your face. Your father watched, leaning on his hoe, and smiled. "After everything," he murmured, "still there is laughter." And in that laughter, you found strength to face another winter. Winter settled over Sicily with crisp air and short days. Unlike the unnatural cold of the darkness, this chill felt ordinary, almost comforting. Frost coated the windows each morning, fires crackled in every hearth, and families huddled together for warmth. The farm slowed its pace. Fields lay bare, animals tucked in their pens. Work turned inward, mending tools, spinning wool, repairing baskets, preserving the last jars of fruit. Helena's farm became a hive of indoor industry, the rhythm of survival shifting with the season. In your own small house, evenings became lessons. By lamplight, your mother patiently guided you and Marcus through words scratched onto wax tablets. Slowly, painfully, the jumble of letters transformed into meaning. Marcus, tongue between his teeth, traced each line with stubborn determination. "See? I can read it," he cried one night, holding up his crooked alpha and beta. "Almost," you teased, grinning. "Almost is still something," your mother said firmly, ruffling Marcus's hair. "And something is how learning begins." Your father, though not a reader himself, added his voice to these lessons in another way. He became your historian, telling stories as you practiced letters. Of your Byzantine village, of Roman emperors, of his own childhood mischief. In his words lived a past that books could not hold. One evening, your father surprised you with a gift, a scroll of parchment he had secretly bought from a passing tutor. Not fine work, but filled with stories simplified for young readers, tales of gods, heroes, and tricksters. Your mother unrolled it carefully, eyes alight. "This is treasure," she whispered. The scroll became the centerpiece of your evenings. She read aloud while you and Marcus followed the letters, tracing them with your fingers. Marcus loved the story of Daedalus and Icarus, though the ending troubled him. "Why did Icarus fly too close to the sun?" he asked. Didn't he know it was dangerous? Sometimes, your mother said softly, people think the rules don't apply to them, or they want too much too fast. Like those who ignore the plague rules, Marcus added with the blunt wisdom of children. You exchanged a glance with your mother. He wasn't wrong. Outside, the world remained uncertain. Word came that Emperor Justinian himself had fallen ill with the plague but survived. Constantinople, they said, had lost nearly a third of its people. Villages in the east were abandoned. Armies struggled to recruit men. The empire trembled, even as Justinian pushed forward with his grand dreams of reconquest and church building. These were vast events, but in your small house they felt distant. What mattered was the fire's warmth, your family's laughter, the letters scratched on wax, and Marcus's growing confidence. One night, you stepped outside to fetch more firewood. The stars above glittered brighter than you had seen in years, sharp against the cold black sky. For a moment, you stood transfixed, remembering the blue haze that once smothered the heavens. Beautiful, isn't it? Your father's voice came behind you. He joined you, gazing upward. Yes, you whispered. Like before. Not before, he said gently. After. Nothing will be the same again. But different doesn't mean worse. We are still here. His words sank deep, warming you more than the firewood in your arms. Winter pressed on, but within its stillness, a seed of hope grew. You had survived darkness. You had avoided plague for now. You had letters, stories, and a family bound tighter than ever. The world outside might be broken, but in your small corner of Sicily, life was beginning to knit itself back together. By the time spring warmed the fields again, life on Helena's farm had found its rhythm. Wheat stretched green across the land, sheep fattened in the pastures, and Marcus, who once could barely look strangers in the eye, now strutted about like a small lord of the chickens. Then, one afternoon, as you hauled water from the well, a familiar figure appeared on the road. Broad-shouldered, tanned from travel, and walking with the steady confidence of someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere. Demetrios, you cried, dropping the bucket so hard it sloshed half its contents onto your shoes. The man laughed, clasping your arm in greeting. Still clumsy, I see. Good, means the farm hasn't turned you into a statue. The reunion was joyous. Your parents welcomed him warmly, Helena offered him food and a place at her table, and Marcus nearly knocked him over with a hug. You're taller, Demetrios observed, squinting down at the boy. Marcus puffed his chest. I'm practically a man now. Ah, Demetrios said gravely, ruffling his hair. Then I suppose men still squeak when they talk. The boy scowled, but laughter rippled through the room. Even Helena's lips twitched, which for her was the equivalent of a belly laugh. Over supper, Demetrios shared news from Syracuse. Trade was picking up, ships once again docking regularly, though some kept quarantine strict. The plague had lessened over the winter, flaring here and there but no longer raging unchecked. The city was scarred, yes, but alive. And Constantinople? Your mother asked cautiously. He hesitated before answering. Changed. A third of its people gone. But the emperor still builds, still dreams of empire. Hagia Sophia rises higher each day. Justinian caught the sickness and lived, so of course, everyone says it's proof of divine favor. Your father muttered into his wine, or proof he's too stubborn to die. Even Helena chuckled at that, though she tried to hide it by coughing into her cup. The next morning, Demetrios pulled you aside. You've grown, he said, not just in height but in something deeper. The darkness left its mark on you, but you carry it well. You didn't know what to say, so you simply nodded. Gratitude burned in your chest. Without him, you wouldn't be here. Without him, there would be no farm, no family, no Marcus asleep in the cot beside yours. Thank you, you said finally. For everything. He waved it off. I just did what needed doing. Besides, he grinned, if I hadn't, who else would have carried you when you tripped over your own feet every mile? You rolled your eyes, but the warmth behind his words was real. When Demetrios left again for the city, promising to return, Marcus sighed dramatically. He eats too much bread, the boy said. We'll go hungry if he keeps visiting. Don't worry, you teased. He'll bring his own next time. Marcus nodded seriously. He should. It's only fair. Your parents laughed so hard at his solemn face that even Marcus, realizing he'd become the joke, cracked a smile. For all the shadows that still lingered in the world, plague, taxes, empire, Demetrios's visit reminded you that laughter too had survived. And sometimes, laughter was the best proof that life went on. Summer returned with fields full of promise. Wheat stood tall and heavy, fruit trees bent with ripening loads, and the vineyard hummed with bees. Everyone on the farm could feel it. This was going to be the best harvest since before the darkness. Which also meant the tax collectors would come sniffing like wolves. One hot morning, your father announced over breakfast, "Helena wants every worker present for the harvest planning. Even the children." Marcus's eyes widened. "Even me?" "Yes," your father said, amused. "You count as half a worker and twice a mouth to feed." "I'll show them," Marcus huffed, cheeks puffed like bread in the oven. "I can carry more than chickens now." At the meeting, Helena spread her plans like a general preparing for battle. Workers assigned to wheat, to grapes, to olives. Storage tallies. Transport schedules. Then came the matter of the imperial levy. 1/5, she said grimly. "It must be ready when the officials arrive." A low groan passed through the group. Thomas muttered, "They'll take the fattest sheep too if we're not careful." "Then we feed them the scrawniest," your father whispered to you, eyes twinkling. "Let them choke on bones." You snorted into your sleeve, earning a stern look from Helena. She heard everything. Always. The weeks of harvest began and the farm became a frenzy. Dawn to dusk, the fields rang with sides, carts creaked under weight, children dashed with water jugs. Marcus, determined to prove himself, carried basket after basket of grapes until he nearly fell face first into the press. "You'll drown in juice before you finish growing," you teased, pulling him upright. He scowled. Better drowned in grapes than useless. By the third day he was so sticky from head to toe that chickens followed him around, pecking at his clothes. Even Helena cracked a smile at the sight, muttering, "He may not survive the plague, but the hens will finish him first." At last, the grain was cut, the grapes pressed, the olives gathered. Helena surveyed the full storehouses with satisfaction, though her lips pressed thin when she calculated the emperor's share. Sure enough, within a week the officials arrived. Fine cloaks, polished boots, smelling faintly of perfumes you hadn't scented in years. They barely looked at the workers, speaking only with Helena. Marcus watched them with narrowed eyes. "They're too clean," he whispered. "Not even dust on their boots. Can't be trusted." You nearly choked trying not to laugh. Out of the mouths of children, truth often came sharp. When the officials finally left, carts laden with the empire's cut, the farm exhaled as if a storm had passed. The workers gathered for a modest celebration, sharing bread, wine, and weary laughter. "Another year survived," Thomas declared, raising his cup. "And another tax paid. Justinian may rebuild his empire on our backs, but we still stand." "Barely," someone muttered. Still, the wine flowed. Marcus sneaked a second piece of honey bread, and for one night the farm felt lighter. Later, as you and Marcus walked back to your small house, he leaned close. "Do you think the emperor eats all that grain himself?" You grinned. "No. He feeds it to his statues to keep them shiny." Marcus laughed so hard he nearly tripped, and your father, walking ahead, turned back smiling. "What's funny?" "Nothing," you said quickly, but Marcus whispered loudly, "The statues eat better than us." Your father chuckled all the way home. And just like that, even a season of hard labor and heavy taxes ended not in despair, but in laughter shared under the Sicilian moon. Autumn crept into Sicily with cooler nights and fields finally resting after the harvest. The farm bustled less, but conversations grew deeper, especially when Thomas dropped his unexpected suggestion. "The children should be schooled," he said one evening, as if remarking on the weather. "School?" Marcus blinked. "Like learning letters? Not chasing sheep?" "Letters last longer than sheep," Thomas replied dryly. "Those sheep smell better." The idea landed like a stone tossed into still water. Ripples of discussion spread across the farm. Helena nodded thoughtfully. "There's a monastery school in the hills. They take children with aptitude. Teach more than scratching names in dirt." Your father frowned. "And while they sit writing, who carries water? Who mends fences?" "Knowledge feeds in its own way," your mother countered. "You can't patch a roof with letters, but you can plan a future with them." Marcus whispered fiercely to you that night, "I'm not leaving the farm. I just learned how to throw hay without sneezing myself half dead." You stifled a laugh. "It's not leaving. It's just learning during the week. We'd still live here." He squinted suspiciously. Does learning make bread taste better? Maybe if you read a recipe that earned you a pillow to the face. When Helena gathered the workers to explain more, the adults looked skeptical. One man muttered, "Books don't milk cows." Another snorted, "Nor scare crows." But Thomas raised a bony finger. "Books remember when people forget. And after what we've lived through, the world will forget quickly." Silence followed his words. Even the hens outside stopped clucking for a heartbeat. Your parents discussed late into the night. You heard their voices through the thin walls. It could mean opportunity, your mother argued. It could mean wasted hands, your father countered. Finally he sighed. "We'll ask the children." That alone shocked you. Adults rarely ask children anything beyond chores. The next evening they sat you and Marcus down seriously. "Would you like to attend the monastery school?" your father asked. Marcus wrinkled his nose. "Do monks beat children?" Your mother hid a smile. "Not if the children behave." "Then I'm doomed," Marcus muttered, earning laughter around the table. You thought carefully. "I want to learn." "But only if Marcus comes too." Your father nodded. "Together then." And just like that, the future shifted slightly. Not only crops and taxes and plague anymore, but lessons, books, and the idea that maybe, just maybe, knowledge could be as valuable as wheat. Marcus still grumbled, "Of course. If I end up a monk, I'll blame you." You smirked. "You won't. You talk too much for vows of silence." Your laughter carried through the Sicilian night, warming the chilly air better than any fire. Winter crept in with sharp winds, but your family's decision was made. You and Marcus would attend the monastery school when lessons began after Epiphany. The first morning you trudged up the hill with Helena's mule carrying baskets of bread and cheese, payment for your tuition. Marcus muttered the whole way. "Why couldn't we pay in sheep? Sheep don't judge your handwriting." "You don't even own sheep," you reminded him. "Exactly," he said, triumphant. "Less responsibility." The monastery loomed like a fortress of stone, its walls damp with centuries of prayers. Inside, robed monks bustled about with scrolls and wax tablets. One of them, Brother Methodios, greeted you with solemn dignity. "Welcome, children. Here ignorance ends," Marcus whispered, "and boredom begins." You elbowed him so hard he nearly dropped the bread basket. Lessons began immediately. The alphabet first, drawn with charcoal on tablets. "A for Alpha," the monk intoned. "Are we done yet?" Marcus muttered. You bit your lip, trying not to laugh. Still, he caught on quickly, letters shaping into words, words into stories. His pride in reading sheep for the first time was unmatched. "See," he announced. "Education agrees with me. It started with sheep." But not everything was serious. During a copying exercise, Marcus tried to draw a goat instead of writing the word. Brother Methodios frowned at the page. "This is not logos. This is livestock." "Very educated livestock," Marcus insisted. The monk sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that had probably been perfected by generations of teachers since the dawn of time. Despite the complaints, you found yourself enchanted. Stories of Homer, fragments of Roman history, even parables from scripture, all woven into the lessons. Each word felt like opening a window to a bigger world. Sometimes, walking home after lessons, you recited aloud to Marcus. He pretended not to care, tossing pebbles at fence posts, but secretly he listened. One evening, you overheard him muttering a line from Homer to the chickens. "Sing, goddess of the wrath of Achilles, and bring me more corn." By midwinter, the routine felt almost normal. Farm chores at dawn, monastery lessons through the day, family around the fire at night. Life no longer revolved only around survival. It carried a new rhythm, one that hinted at possibility. Even Marcus admitted it, grudgingly. "Fine," he said one cold evening. "Maybe letters are useful. But if they ever try to teach us numbers, I'm running away." You grinned, watching the fire crackle. "Don't worry. I'll chase you." With a scroll. And for the first time in years, laughter felt like part of the lesson too. By spring, the monastery lessons had become routine. Marcus could now read bread, sheep, and nap, his three priorities in life. You meanwhile devoured every scrap of history the monks shared. One day, Brother Methodios unrolled a worn map of the empire. His finger traced the coasts of Italy. "The emperor fights here against the Goths. Rome itself, they say, may soon return fully under his rule." The room buzzed with awe. To the children, Rome was half legend, half bedtime story. Marcus raised his hand. Will Rome send us more sheep? Methodios blinked. No. Then why should we care? Half the class laughed, and Methodios muttered something about patience being a lost virtue. Back at the farm, Helena confirmed the rumors. Imperial riders came again, she said one evening. They say Belisarius has victories. But victories mean more taxes. Your father frowned, tallying in his head. More taxes mean fewer sheep. Why does everything in this family lead back to sheep? Your mother asked. Because sheep never demand scrolls or war, Marcus declared, and everyone burst out laughing. But laughter couldn't silence the unease. The empire's hunger for men, grain, and coin reached even distant farms. Every victory meant higher levies. Every loss meant rumors of enemies moving closer. Sometimes travelers passed, telling stories of Constantinople's rebuilding. The Hagia Sophia rises higher than anything in the city, one said, eyes shining. Marcus leaned close to you and whispered, bet it doesn't smell better than our barn. You nearly choked on your bread. Despite the empire's turbulence, life on the farm pulsed forward. Wheat sprouted green, lambs bleated in the meadows, your mother's lessons expanded from letters to whole passages. One evening, she handed you both the scroll your father had bought. Read, she said, together. Marcus squinted, lips moving slowly. Date, lose? Deadless, you corrected. He glared. Close enough. His wings probably smelled like sheep anyway. That night you lay awake thinking. Empires fought, emperors built monuments, monks copied scrolls, but here on the farm what mattered was food, shelter, family. Still, you couldn't help wondering, would your names, your lives, ever matter to history beyond this valley? Or would you be remembered only as two farm children who could read a little and chase sheep well? Marcus snored beside you, one arm dangling off the bed. You smiled. Perhaps that was enough. The summer sun poured over Sicily, brighter than it had been in years. Wheat fields swayed golden, orchards hung heavy with fruit, and for once the harvest promised more than mere survival. Helena gathered everyone. This year, she said, we celebrate not just survival, but abundance. Marcus whispered, does that mean double bread? Your father chuckled. It means we'll eat until you stop complaining. So, never, Marcus replied proudly. Work filled every day, cutting, binding, threshing, but the labor felt lighter because it led to feasting. You carried sheaves alongside your father, Marcus darted with water jugs like a self-declared general of hydration, and your mother baked bread that smelled so good half the workers accidentally wandered near the oven. One afternoon, Marcus dropped face first into a haystack, groaning. I'm done. Tell Helena I've become part of the harvest. Helena raised an eyebrow as she walked by. Then we'll store you in the barn with the sheep. Marcus popped up immediately. On second thought, I live. When the last cart of grain rolled into storage, Helena announced a festival. Lanterns hung from posts, wine flowed, and for the first time in years, laughter roared louder than fear. Thomas played his reed flute, surprisingly lively. A few workers tried dancing, stumbling more than stepping. Is that supposed to be a jig? Marcus asked. It's supposed to be joy, you said, tugging him to join. He resisted, until your father lifted him by the armpits and plopped him in the circle. His squeals turned into laughter, and he danced like a goat on loose stones. That night, as the festival glowed, your mother placed honey bread on the table, the same recipe she'd made in your old village. For a moment, memories of home and the reality of Sicily blended. It wasn't the same, but it was something new, something whole. You looked around. Your parents, Marcus sticky with honey, Helena smiling for once, Thomas tapping his foot to the flute. The farm felt less like refuge and more like destiny. For the first time since the darkness began, you allowed yourself to think not just of surviving the year, but of growing into the years ahead. Marcus licked honey off his fingers and sighed happily. If every plague ends with bread this good, maybe it wasn't so bad. Your mother gave him such a look that the table erupted in laughter. One hot afternoon, while you and Marcus were hauling buckets of water to the sheep pen, a lone figure appeared on the dusty road. His stride was familiar, steady, purposeful. Demetrios, you shouted, dropping your bucket so hard water splashed everywhere, including all over Marcus. Marcus sputtered, soaked to the knees. Couldn't you just wave like a normal person? Demetrios looked older, leaner, but his eyes still carried that same mix of weariness and kindness. He embraced your father, bowed respectfully to your mother, and ruffled Marcus's hair. "I'm not a child anymore," Marcus protested, trying to flatten his hair. "You still whine like one," Demetrios said with a grin. At supper, over bread and new wine, he shared news from Syracuse. "The city rebuilds," he said. "Ships come again. Trade grows. Even laughter has returned to the harbors." "And the plague?" your father asked. "Fewer cases. Nothing like before." Relief spread through the room like warmth from the hearth. But Marcus had other priorities. "Did you bring us anything?" "Marcus," your mother hissed, embarrassed. Demetrios chuckled and pulled a small pouch from his belt. Inside lay 2 carved dice. "For games," he explained. "And for remembering chance. It can save or ruin a man." Marcus grabbed them immediately. "I'll roll them every morning. If I get double 6, I won't do chores." "Then may you roll snake eyes forever," Helena muttered dryly from the corner. Later, Demetrios took you aside. His voice softened. "You've grown," he said. "Not just taller, stronger. Your father was right to fight for your place on that ship." You felt the weight of his words. Without him, without that desperate exchange, you'd never be here. "I still think about that night," you admitted. "So do I," he replied. Then he added with a crooked smile, "though less when I have good wine." Before he left, Demetrios promised to return again when trade allowed. Marcus clung to his arm dramatically. "You're not allowed to leave unless you bring more gifts." Demetrios laughed. "Then I'll bring you a goat next time." Helena snorted. "Don't you dare." Watching him walk back down the road, you realized some bonds survive distance and time. In a world still shaken by darkness and plague, that was no small thing. Marcus rolled his new dice in the dirt and groaned. "Snake eyes. Looks like I'm feeding the chickens after all." Autumn painted Sicily gold and harvest wagons creaked full of grain. Life felt almost normal again. Then one afternoon, a band of weary travelers appeared on the road. 3 men, 2 women, clothes dusty, accents Eastern. Your father hailed them in your old dialect, and their faces lit with surprise. Soon, everyone crowded around as they shared news from the east. "Thrace is starving," one woman said, voice low. 2 failed harvests. Villages abandoned. "And Constantinople?" your father asked quickly. The eldest man grimaced. "Plague. They say 1/3 of the city died. Even the emperor himself was struck, though he survived." The room went silent. A whole city brought low. The thought chilled you more than the coming winter winds. Marcus, however, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If 1/3 died, that still leaves 2/3. And all of them probably want our sheep." Even Helena cracked a smile at that, though she quickly hid it. The travelers stayed 3 nights. They spoke of Justinian's wars, victories in Italy, but endless costs. They described abandoned lands where wolves roamed villages, and rivers running past empty mills. "Sounds like the world's ending," one muttered. Thomas snorted. "People always think that. Then they wake up hungry and still need bread." Marcus cornered one of the travelers by the fire. "Did you see Constantinople?" The man nodded solemnly. "Were there chickens?" Marcus asked. The man blinked. "Yes." Marcus sighed with relief. "Then the world isn't ending. As long as chickens survive, so will we." The traveler looked bewildered, but your laughter eased the heaviness of the moment. When the group left, continuing westward, your family stood together, thoughtful. The plague, the empire's struggles, it all seemed so far yet so close. That night, you lay awake, the wooden bird from your father warm in your hand. The empire trembled, but here on the farm, under the same stars that shone before the darkness, you felt the fragile balance of survival. Marcus rolled his dice beside you, whispering to himself. Then he grinned. "Double 6. Tomorrow I'm not feeding the pigs." You laughed softly. "Helena will say otherwise." "True," Marcus admitted, "but hope is important." Winter settled over Sicily again, though gentler than in the north. Frost kissed the fields, smoke curled from chimneys, and chores shrank as nights grew long. For children that meant one thing: more time for mischief. Marcus invented the first Farm Olympics, declaring contests for who could carry the heaviest bucket, climb the haystack fastest, or chase chickens most successfully. "I'm champion of everything," he announced proudly after 3 wins. You're also the only one who made the chickens angry enough to chase you, you pointed out, laughing as he scrambled over the fence with feathers flying behind him. In the evenings, families gathered in the common room for warmth and stories. Thomas told sagas of gods and heroes, embellishing each with dramatic gestures. One man, Odysseus, outwitted a cyclops, he declared. Marcus whispered, bet the cyclops just had hay in his eye. Half the children snickered until Helena glared them silent, though even she fought a smile. One particularly stormy night, lightning flashing over the hills, Marcus pulled out his carved dice. If I roll double 6, he announced solemnly, the storm stops. He rolled. Snake eyes. Everyone groaned as thunder rattled the shutters. Clearly, Marcus said quickly, I meant the storm will stop eventually. Despite the laughter, shadows lingered. Travelers brought word of plague flaring again in Egypt, of tax collectors demanding more for Justinian's endless wars. Fear never vanished completely, just slipped into corners of the room. But in those long winter nights, with stories, games, and even ridiculous chicken chases, the farm remembered joy. One evening, Marcus leaned against you sleepily. Do you think we'll still laugh when we're grown? You touched the wooden bird in your pocket. If we don't, we'll make each other. He smiled, drifting to sleep, the storm outside forgotten. By early spring, the fields were greening again. Hope returned with the sunlight, though everyone still carried memories of the plague. One morning, as you and Marcus repaired a fence post, a figure appeared at the farm's gate. The man was tall, travel-worn, his cloak dusty and his beard streaked with gray. He leaned on a staff and carried a satchel slung across his back. Helena stepped forward, cautious but welcoming. Traveler, what business brings you here? She asked. The man bowed. I seek work, or at least a place to rest. I was once a scribe in Constantinople, but the city? He trailed off, shaking his head. Everyone knew what had happened there. Helena studied him, then nodded. No sick signs? No fever? None, he replied, steady. Thomas examined him with sharp eyes before murmuring, he's fine. Hungry but fine. So he was given bread, water, and a corner of the common house for the night. That evening, curiosity swirled around the stranger. Marcus whispered loudly, if he's a scribe, maybe he can write faster than Mother can teach us. The man chuckled. I can. And draw maps too. Marcus's eyes widened. Maps? Like where dragons live. The scribe grinned. If you wish it so. Soon he showed you letters shaped with more elegance than your mother's rough teaching in the dirt. He sketched a map of the empire, labeling seas and mountains, even your old Constantinople. For the children it was like watching magic. Helena, practical as always, asked, can you help with records? Counting grain, keeping tallies? The scribe nodded. It is honest work and I'll earn my bread. That night, by firelight, your father whispered, strange, isn't it? We lost so much in Constantinople. Yet pieces of it keep finding their way back to us. And as the stranger's careful letters glowed in lamplight, you realized, perhaps history itself had wandered to your farm, ready to be written again. The scribe, who introduced himself as Nicetas, quickly became part of farm life. He wasn't strong in the fields, but his sharp mind and steady hand proved just as valuable. Soon, evenings by the fire turned into lessons. You, Marcus, and even a few curious farmhands gathered while Nicetas taught letters, numbers, and tales from history. He spoke of emperors, lost cities, and strange lands far beyond Sicily. Marcus raised his hand one night, eyes wide. Master Nicetas, did you really see the emperor? Nicetas coughed. From a distance. He was surrounded by guards and looked quite imperial. Marcus whispered to you, that means he was grumpy. You snorted, trying to hide your laugh. Nicetas also taught riddles and clever sayings. Knowledge, he told you, is like seed. It grows where planted. But weeds grow too if you don't keep watch. Thomas, sitting nearby, muttered, that explains half the farm gossip. Everyone chuckled. But it wasn't all laughter. Nicetas shared grim truths about Constantinople. The empty houses, the silent markets, the plague pits. His words carried weight, reminding everyone why knowledge mattered, because memory was fragile and forgetting was dangerous. One night, as the fire crackled low, Marcus tugged your sleeve. Do you think we'll ever go back east? To the Empire? You shook your head. Maybe one day. But for now, our world is here. And if Nicetas keeps teaching us, Maybe we'll carry the empire with us, just in stories and words. That night, lying in your small cot, you realized something. The darkness had stolen much, but it had also given you a strange gift. A second chance to learn, to build, to imagine a future beyond survival. And in that flickering firelight, hope wore the face of ink, parchment, and a scribe who had lost everything, yet still carried knowledge like treasure. By early spring, travelers once again passed along the road near Helena's farm. Some came seeking food, others only carrying news. And news these days was often heavier than wheat. One ragged merchant swore he saw Justinian himself carried through the streets of Constantinople in a golden litter. "He's alive," the merchant said, "but thinner than a scarecrow. Some say he beat the plague by sheer stubbornness." Marcus leaned close to you and whispered, "I bet he just scared the plague away with his taxes." Another traveler brought word of battles in Italy. The emperor's armies pushed the Goths back, but victory came at a cost. Burned villages, empty fields, hungry civilians. "Sounds like winning looks a lot like losing," Thomas muttered as he mended a harness strap. One evening, as workers rested by the fire, a peddler spun wild rumors. Strange lights in the sky, rivers turning red, stars that fell and vanished. "The end of the world," he whispered dramatically. Marcus piped up, "If the world ends, does that mean no chores?" The whole room burst into laughter, even Helena covering her mouth to hide a grin. But beneath the humor, unease lingered. Every rumor seemed like an echo of the great darkness, a reminder that the world could tilt again without warning. Your mother tried to steady everyone's spirits. "We cannot live only on fear. The sun rose this morning and it will rise tomorrow. That's enough for now." That night, lying awake, you thought of all the voices, merchants, peddlers, travelers. Some true, some false. Yet each story had power. You wondered which stories would outlast you and which would fade like smoke. And you realized, maybe survival wasn't just about food and shelter. Maybe it was also about choosing which stories to carry forward. As the sun grew stronger and days stretched longer, Helena declared the farm deserved a proper festival. After years of darkness, she said, "We must celebrate light while we have it." Preparations began immediately. Workers wove garlands of flowers, children practiced songs, and Thomas tried to build a drum out of an old barrel. It sounded suspiciously like someone knocking on a door, but no one had the heart to tell him. On the festival day, lanterns lined the paths, glowing like captured stars. Tables overflowed with bread, cheese, olives, and even a small barrel of wine Helena had been saving. Marcus darted from group to group, announcing himself as official fun inspector. "Too serious," he told one farmer. "Smile more." "Bread needs more honey," he told your mother, who shooed him away laughing. As night fell, music filled the air. Helena, usually so stern, even joined in a simple circle dance. Marcus grabbed your hand and pulled you along until you were laughing too hard to resist. Then Thomas raised a cup and made a toast. "To the sun that left us, to the sun that returned, and to the light we carry inside when the world goes dark." The crowd murmured in agreement, drinking deeply. Later, as the festival wound down, you and Marcus sat beneath a tree, fireflies flickering in the warm night. "This is the first time I feel like the darkness never happened," Marcus said softly. You nodded, though you knew better. The darkness had shaped everything. But maybe, just maybe, it had also taught everyone to treasure light more fiercely than before. One hot afternoon, as cicadas hummed in the fields, a rider arrived carrying a sealed scroll. He bore the imperial insignia, though his horse looked more tired than official. Helena broke the seal and read aloud, "Orders for another levy of grain to support Justinian's wars." Groans rippled through the farm workers. "Another fifth?" Thomas muttered. "At this rate, the emperor will be dining better than we do." Marcus raised his hand like a student. "Can we just send him chickens instead? They multiply faster." Even Helena nearly laughed. Still, the burden was heavy. Your father spent hours at the table, counting and recounting the farm's stores. "We'll manage," he said finally, though his face was tight. That night, your mother found you staring at the parchment. "What troubles you?" she asked. "Why do we keep giving when the empire gives nothing back?" you replied. She thought for a moment. "Because sometimes survival is knowing which battles not to fight. We can endure this, but we won't endure if we're reckless." Later, Marcus whispered conspiratorially, If I learn to write really fancy, maybe I can send the emperor a letter. Dear Justinian, please stop taking our food. Signed, Hungry in Sicily. You nearly choked laughing, imagining the emperor's face. But when silence returned, you realized Marcus's joke carried truth. Words could travel further than swords sometimes. Perhaps one day, with enough learning, you might write letters that changed things. For now, though, the farm bent under the empire's weight, but did not break. Autumn came golden, the fields full and the barns heavy with grain despite the emperor's levy. Life on the farm moved in rhythms that finally felt steady, planting, harvesting, teaching, laughing. Nicetas continued his lessons, Marcus proudly reading whole lines aloud. See? I'm nearly a philosopher, he declared, though he still spelled chicken 3 different ways in one sentence. One evening, sitting outside as stars spread overhead, your father spoke quietly. When the darkness first came, I thought we'd never see this again. Clear skies, laughter, children running free. Yet here we are. Your mother nodded. Not the same as before, but perhaps better. We've learned what matters. Thomas added, and what doesn't? Taxes, plague, storms, they come and go. But bread, stories, family, that's what lasts. Marcus stretched out on the grass. And chickens? He said solemnly. Everyone burst into laughter, the sound carrying across the fields. That winter, your family moved into the larger farmhouse, your father now officially Helena's trusted farm manager. The rooms echoed at first, but soon filled with warmth, books, and Marcus's endless chatter. Looking back, you realized you were no longer just surviving. You were living, building, becoming. Years later, people would still whisper about the year without sun, about the blue haze and the plague. But for you, memory meant more than fear. It meant Marcus's laughter, your parents' hands steady on your shoulders, Helena's stern kindness, and the quiet resilience of ordinary people. The darkness had taught you this. Nothing is permanent, not empires, not winters, not even despair. But what we build together, in trust and in hope, can outlast any shadow. And as another spring dawned over Sicily, sunlight spilling gold across the fields, you felt certain of one thing. Whatever came next, you were ready.